Silver Society.
Welcome to the Silver Eye Society podcast, the podcast where we look at film to find the ancient themes behind our modern issues. We're looking at a movie that is perhaps very obviously relevant to our times now, V for Vendetta. It's a movie that a little bit glamorizes, the big T, the terrorism, the thing that we now all are for using free speech, according to the Biden admin. That's fine. That's fine. In V for Vendetta, the terrorist is the good guy. But what makes this movie interesting is the fact that we've all seen it, and we all see the dynamics of an authoritarian regime playing out, and yet somehow it seems that we remain blind to these issues in our own modern reality. I'm not sure why it is that if you switch around the names, the colors, the issues, people don't seem to see the very same patterns they can easily identify when it's in a different side, different tribe. And that's what we're discussing today. Why is it that it's so hard for people to see these really old patterns of corruption and abusive power when it comes from a direction that they aren't predisposed to identifying as the bad guys? Now, for every episode, as we must, the word of the podcast.
Enter the good guy. The guy that's just bringing the words to the people, bringing the etymology to the people. And quick note on this, so I won't argue because we want to get to the word of the podcast. Saying that the hero of this story is a terrorist and he's a good guy, do remember he murders a woman in her sleep by injecting her with poison. So it's a little gray.
Do remember that she
it's a
wanted
little gray.
it. She wanted it.
Okay, well,
she literally said, "Thank you. I've been waiting." Like she
I don't think that's a defense against murder. But anyway.
It was assisted euthanasia. Okay, this is like very ethical territory here.
So, word of the podcast, Archon. Now, we've been doing this podcast for some time now. And it's time for the words of the podcast to become a little bit more complex in their puzzling nature, and to allow you, the audience, to figure out where I'm going without me telling you where we're going. Archon, a noun, one of the 9 chief magistrates of ancient Athens. 1650s, from the Greek archon, ruler, commander, chief, captain. Noun, use the present participle of archine, be the first, to begin from, make preparation for. A word of uncertain origin.
I like
quite
those.
A few. Yeah, well, if you'll pay close attention, you'll notice that oftentimes these old Greek words, they say a word of uncertain origin. So archon, one might think about that beginning of that word, ARCH. One might think of a particular political ideology that sounds like that. These are my hints I'm giving to the audience and to you. Archon. Do you want to help the audience out and take a guess where I'm going?
I'm completely lost.
Okay, well,
Archon is a political ideology?
Okay, so we gotta get etymology. Etymology's hard, and I understand that. So let's guide us through briefly. The Greek prefix an means not. Okay, you're with me there, right? An. Okay, so now take that an and put it in front of the word of the podcast.
Anarchon?
Okay,
Anarchism.
now, right, because not ruling, no ruler. So people, this is where we're going with the word of the podcast. I've given you the softballs, I've given you the trivia, I've given you the fun, and I'll continue to do it here and there.
All right, let's
but every
settle
now
down.
and then we challenge.
All right.
The word of the podcast has grown strong.
Jesus. The word of the podcast is anarchic in and of itself. So what's going on there with the anarchism? You like to just drop the word of the podcast, but what the people need, is to have it linked to both the movie and to the modern day. So we know we got some mumblings of anarchism going on the cyber sphere, you know. Michael Malice, everybody's favorite and most well-known anarchist, the only anarchist that I know of. But what's going on here? So what do we do? You know, I put out some tweet the other day that was like, the left and the right are dead. You know, we need to start looking at a different dichotomy, perhaps, which is people who trust that those with obscene amounts of power care about them and those who know better. And I love to look through the replies because I hate myself. And for sure enough, there was gold in there. And it was, so what is it then? Anarchism is the option? It's like, okay, yeah, dude, sure, whatever. That's the only choice. Is that the only choice? Is that what happens when power becomes so corrupt and there's no other way out? I guess you just blow it all up. But this movie isn't really totally about anarchism, though. I see it as a populist movie. So, what do you think? Where do you see
about
anarchism?
Anarchy in the UK? Which is a line from the movie. A guy goes into a grocery store. Very brief scene in the movie. A guy goes into a gas station, fires a gun in the air, and says "Anarchy in the UK."
And just because we say something doesn't mean it's true. Maybe he doesn't know he got his politics from Twitter.
We'll get into, I don't know if it'll be this episode or the second one, where we talk about Alan Moore, who is the writer of the comic book in which this movie is based. He is, somebody that I think espouses a kind of left-leaning anarchist point of view. You see that in the film. There's right-leaning anarchist point of view, like Michael Malice. I don't know that necessarily. I think that calling that a system of government that is a great idea to adopt is the solution. I don't know if I'm trying to do the thing you asked, which is to bring into modern life or whatever. But maybe there's things that we could learn from anarchist tendencies, and apply. You don't have to take everything wholesale and take everything some ideology says and think it's 100% correct.
You don't have to do that. I like to harbor anarchist tendencies. That's the level of anarchism I feel comfortable with at this point. Tendencies. I think maybe everybody should have anarchist tendencies, because what does that mean? That means that if push comes to shove, that you'll be willing to be completely self-governed or governmentless. And maybe that's right. Like if you have a relationship, you should be willing to leave the person at some point, right? There shouldn't be a relationship where you say, no matter what, I'll never leave you. What if they start like beating you? Or if you find out that they're like, they love really bad film, you have to have a line where you say enough is enough. And maybe that's what anarchist tendencies are. That's the line where you say enough is enough. That's what they say in this movie.
We're talking about anarchy briefly for some reason.
It's the word of the podcast, asshole.
No, I fooled you. It's not the word of the podcast. Archon is the word of the podcast. But anyway, so I think of it maybe a little bit more as less a decision than a potential necessity. Mm-hmm. So if things get really bad in any given situation, and there's problems with the ruler, mm-hmm. whether that be through their own fault, whether it be through a kind of tyranny or totalitarian mindset, or just simply the breakdown of systems which support and give legitimacy to that ruler through no fault of their own particularly. If that happens, then you are potentially going to find yourself in varying levels of a state of anarchy. So what I would say is simply be prepared in case that happens. And I know everybody thinks that it's all kind of a joke right now, and it's all kind of fun. But do you remember just a year ago or so, or a little more, in the height of the pandemic and everything, a whole bunch of people I knew were buying guns.
Dude,
and not just people on the right, people on the left. People were running out buying a whole lot of guns. Now,
I looked in my like I was looking through my pictures on my phone the other day, and I found from like towards the beginning of the pandemic this very esteemed historian and writer like listing out on Twitter, you need to get canned goods, you need to get these type of things that are non-perishable, make sure you have a way to filter water, like things like if society collapsed. And now here we are like recording a podcast and, you know, being fine and having Coachella and shit or whatever. You know, it didn't come to pass, but there was that moment where everybody was like, is this the time? Like, am I going to have to fend for myself? And in that moment, you better hope that you had cultivated your anarchist tendencies. Am I right? Is this right?
This is where we need a sponsor for where it's like the like canned food sponsor, you know, that you see on a lot of like more libertarian or right wing podcasts where it's like
awesome.
buy your gallon of pasta for the end times or whatever. We
Those
really
are the
need better
sponsorships
sponsors.
that I want.
I guess my point was simply, there's a level of preparedness to sustain yourself through times of trouble that might be related to the idea of anarchy. I'm not convinced that anarchy is a great idea. And I think in this film you see that moment. That moment's very telling to me, where the guy just runs into a gas station and shoots in the air and robs him and says anarchy in the UK. Now, to be fair, I don't think that's what Alan Moore or Michael Malice would suggest is the great, is the culmination of anarchy, left or right, is someone robbing a gas station. I don't think that's what they're saying, and I don't think that's what they believe. But
no, I think that part of the movie is actually the display of the chaos that comes when the too heavy order breaks down. So, right, that's when things start to break down that much, you just get pure chaos, which is that scene. Like, it's not like that's not the philosophy of anarchy. That's just a robbery and chaos, with someone shouting anarchy. So I think that's how I interpreted that. I didn't actually think that was an anarchist.
My point of view is similar to yours in that I think there are anarchist tendencies that everyone should be familiar with. Cultivating a little bit of personal anarchy. Because at the end of the day, left or right, anarchist, left or right, whatever you are, someone's going to probably try to rob you and they're going to scream a slogan. So be prepared. That's all.
Yeah. Be prepared.
People,
all right. No more.
Anarchy. I'll say what I want to say. People will always scream slogans while they're robbing you. They tend to do that.
I guess, I don't know. I can't speak to that, but it seems possible. It seems like a bad idea. You should kind of just rob people in silence, right? Like, less evidence. Because, I mean, if I robbed someone, I was like, anarchy in the UK, someone would definitely be like, well, the robber shouted anarchy in the UK, so we know that she's probably politically active. And they'd find my Twitter and they'd get me. So I think you should rob people in silence. Okay, that's more advice. So this is what we want to talk about, though. Besides anarchy tendencies, which you should cultivate, it's endorsed. I want to talk about how this movie is like a textbook map of the way an authoritarian regime gains power and doubles down on power, and why it's such a famous movie, and yet for some reason we cannot identify these very obvious patterns in our own society. It's maddening to me. It's driving me crazy. I'm going to try to keep it together here and not get frustrated and, get loud up in here about anarchism. But you have so many elements in this movie, right? Which is, they even have the whole virus thing. I didn't remember that this movie has a whole subplot about the government trying to engineer some kind of virus or something, and then the doctors and the scientists that are performing the experiments, of course, have the textbook, we're doing this for the betterment of our whole society. We're just, abusing a small population of people for the greater good. And then you have it get out of hand, and you have the cover up, and you have the pinning of those humanitarian crimes on extremist groups. And you have lockdowns. You have a media environment that is completely controlled. You have the essentially sanitization of humor and the punishment of artists that mock powerful figures and the narrative or whatever. So, I mean, you have everything in this movie to understand what it looks like when power is growing in a tyrannical direction. And yet, we hear about how lockdowns are so important until they're not. We hear about how following the mandates and the rules are so important until they're not. And we have the doubling down of very obviously corrupt and influenced media upon the regular people speaking, and how that is dangerous. So, I mean, what do we make of this? Why do I feel like I live in an upside down world where we're so obsessed with identifying like fascism and tyranny, but it only comes with one face? It has to be right wing. It has to be like this religious, fundamentalist appearance to it. Like, why is it that no one can identify left-wing authoritarianism? And so, of course, it just naturally flourishes unchecked.
Well, we do. I do it. I point out things that I think are left-wing authoritarianism. People do it constantly. You do. I'm saying that
I hate when you do
What
that.
Is this expression on your face?
I hate when you say I do as if like you're the general public. I'm not talking about us.
No, I'm just not your reply people on Twitter. I'm trying to be positive. I'm saying that a lot of people do this. Look, so one of the problems here is that it's not a problem, but this movie was made in 2005 during the war in Iraq and war in Afghanistan, during the Bush presidency, during a time where a kind of, obviously this is taken to its extreme, where there's this kind of link between Christianity and fascism, which is then the government in the movie. But it's more understandable during that time period based on some of the things that were going on. And I don't blame Alan Moore.
It's who's in power. That's the thing with these things. It's like when I was younger, I was more aligned against the right and conservatives because they held more power, they held more sway in the culture. Now they don't. So now your scrutiny should be applied to those who are in power, which is the left.
In general, and these are all generalities, that's correct. So the question is what? I'm trying to say it in a positive way. I think that a lot of people are identifying these things and looking at particularly like the situation in Canada, where you have an extremely liberal left-leaning government, headed up by Trudeau. They see the same. People are seeing through this, and to be fair, it's not just people on the right or in the more libertarian area or even the center. I think people on the left are also seeing some of the problems with it. So that's why I've been generally a little bit more hopeful recently.
Yeah, I think you're right.
This movie, though, it's a lot of the imagery and a lot of the stuff is from that war on terrorism type thing. And I mean, I was against back then the Patriot Act. I was against all those things that were being pushed through from Bush Jr. You know, kind of. I see. The problem is, I'm not sure when it gets down to this kind of stuff, these control mechanisms and this. It doesn't even matter if it's left or right. I think that it's just, and this is where maybe it is anarchy in the UK. Like, governments just tend to get out of control, and they use fear of the population. And I just feel like everyone should recognize that both the right and the left, in a general way, they do this.
Yeah. Well, this is what we're going to speak about in the next episode on. We're going to do 2 parts. So we're speaking in this episode on trying to recognize these dynamics, even if they appear in forms that you don't expect them to. And then the next episode we're going to do is going to be on the way fear is used to enact these kind of like tyrannical measures, and that how it fools people, and panic, gets people to go along with things that otherwise they might more rationally question and all that. But okay, yeah, so the Bush era, all of that, I was against all of that too. And it's it's just, so here's what I think. I think it's Peterson that says that an ideology is a like fragment of a story. So as opposed to having a fully developed worldview, an ideology is like having a piece of understanding of the world. And so if you only have this shard of understanding, you're going to miss out on a lot of what's actually going on, because you only have this one tool for analyzing everything. And you see that with certain kinds of like leftism, right? It's wild to me. Like, all of my friends, I mean, if it rains, they blame capitalism. It's this one trick pony ideology, which is every ill comes back down to the one issue that you have to understand the world through, which is anti-capitalism or anti-racism or whatever it is that you cling onto as your story for understanding the world. But it's just a chapter in the story of what it is to understand the whole world. There's many more layers, and there's a lot more that you don't know. That's why I prefer not an ideology, but more like a system of values and, things like truth, generosity, compassion, equality. I like to look at the world through values instead, because then I can, assess things in a more methodical way. Instead of having to try to force everything into a single story, I can just look at something and say, does this hold truth up? Does this hold compassion up? Instead of saying, well, everything is supposed to be white people's fault, but in this situation, it's not. Okay, so I have to find a way to blame them. That's what happens with these kind of ideologies, is that you have to do this reverse engineering, which is you start with the conclusion, and then from there, you build out the reasons why your conclusion is right, instead of genuinely trying to get to the truth of a situation. And so I think that that's really why we can have watched all these movies about tyranny, about, all the stuff with the pandemic too, like 28 Days Later, all these kind of movies where quarantining and viruses are a theme. It's crazy to me that we all grew up on movies like this. And then when something like this happens and you start to see these dynamics of 2 weeks to slow the spread, 2 months to slow the spread, 2 years to slow the spread, we don't grab on it. And yeah, I know that there's more people that are definitely, seeing through it for sure. And that's very heartening. But you would think that a culture that is rife with these kind of movies that are very suspicious of government and, focused on apocalyptic events would be ready to go, ready to catch these dynamics in real life. And I wonder,
don't think so.
Well, I wonder if there's even a condemnation of art there. I worry, why is it that we can watch these stories play out in art and they haven't gotten into us enough to help us see them play out in life?
what movie can you even put your if we assume in a general way, and it's actually not correct, because let's use Canada for a second, because that's in the news right now, and I've been following that and paying attention. I didn't know that if you're unvaccinated in Canada, you're not allowed to leave the country. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I found that out
maybe I'd
yesterday.
heard that at one point, but I didn't know that. That's severe. That's worse than it is in the United States.
Yeah, you've lost your right to movement. Like, you become a prisoner of the state. That's very far-reaching.
So let me get to why I think that maybe, to some degree, this is the case. Because we're not, in the West, practiced in seeing left-wing governments be totalitarian. That's just not the programming. And you see it in this movie. That's not Alan Moore's perspective. His concern was a right-wing fascist pseudo-Christian dictatorship. And hey, if that were what was in power, I would be against that also. I would be totally with it. But I'm looking around myself, and that's simply not the case. And so now, in the year 2022, fair enough, that was your concern in 2005. And we could argue about this or that and say, but I don't care. That's not the situation it is right now. Right now, you have Justin Trudeau, who is like the most...
he's like the poster child of like a liberal leader.
Right.
You know, like,
right.
I mean,
so we're simply not... Now, here's where you get people from Eastern Europe who lived under communism.
They can see
or
it.
Cuba to an extent, or Venezuela, people that have come from these other systems where they struggled under a left-wing authoritarian totalitarian system. They will tell you their practice, they understand, but that is not the cultural output of the West and Hollywood. It's simply not. It's just
weird,
not.
though.
So of course we can't see that. If you remember, in 28 Days Later, it was the army became the bad guys because they were like, take it. It's always that. And I understand those concerns. Those are valid concerns also. But what movie do you have? And part of this briefly is a historical problem, because at the end of World War II, we needed the Soviets as allies versus the Germans, the Nazi regime. And so right from the beginning, there was a lot of us, well, like we used to call Stalin, like Uncle Joe. We had to whitewash a bunch of their crimes because we were allying with someone to destroy another regime that had committed a bunch of crimes. And that went on for a long time. Now, granted, during the Cold War, there was like a very anti-communism thing that went on and did go on. But then after the fall of the Soviet Union, why would there even be a concern with left-leaning totalitarian governments? Because the biggest left-leaning totalitarian government in the world crumbled. Actually, not China. I mean, this is the other thing that just blows my mind. The biggest Communist Party is in China, but I'm not going to go. I'm going to give in my desire for unity with the Olympics in Beijing, I will give China a break during this episode. You know,
taking your
because
cues
I want
from Nancy Pelosi or something.
because because even though the Biden State Department, not the Trump State Department, though he was the one that started it, to be fair, the Biden State Department is still trying to figure out whether or not the China... I know this is real. I mean, they haven't... And Biden himself has said this. They're not sure that genocide is being done in China. They're still debating whether or not it qualifies as such. Wow. But during the debate, we're still like, yeah, let's go do the Olympics. Now, granted, they didn't send officials and all that. They're just saying, hey, athletes, go there. I guess I'm not giving China... I'll never give it a break.
I mean, why?
Well, there's no reason to, but I mean,
exactly.
I don't like.
Well, this is again
I can't
to your
fathom
point.
it.
This is what it is, though, right? Like, for some reason, there's this invisible specter of like leftist tyranny, whether it be communism.
Can I bring this together? Let me bring this together briefly. I need to bring this together in this point. I think the reason is money to a large degree, and I think that in this movie you see something. Because, yeah, Alan Moore is concerned with this kind of Christian fascism thing, right, in the movie. But what he really is concerned with is corruption. Because if you actually look at say like the bishop in the movie, right? He's a child molester in essence, right? He or something similar to that in this film. So that's not what anyone would actually agree Christianity is. That's the corrupt version of that. And so he's concerned with the corrupt version of a Christianity that is joined with the state, which everyone, including Christians, should be and would be concerned with and against. So he in some ways, this is like an anarchist should do, left or right. He's concerned with power and power centers and the corruption of power centers.
Yeah, which is
and
fair.
I'm
That's
concerned
why,
with that too. And
Yeah.
insofar as that goes, then,
Well, that's fair because that's what makes this movie worth watching. If it was too hard on like, oh, we're just concerned about, this kind of like right-wing Christian fascism, it wouldn't be as interesting and it wouldn't be as ripe for taking apart, because the reason we're able to do that is because so many of the just pure authoritarian dynamics of corruption and intimidation and all of that are on display regardless of what side of the political spectrum has gotten out of hand. In this movie, it just takes this particular form. What I find funny, though, and it just kind of like, I gotta laugh, because it's just, when I was younger and I was like, totally card-carrying communist type, very into that whole thing, socialism, then, all the whole thing. When I was into that, that was definitely not the politics at large. Like, that was not at all. It was more subversive because you had like very institutional figures, very like, a lot of times it would be the conservative presidents, whatever, Bush. But even still, it seemed, regardless of whether it was Democrat or Republican in office with the majority, it seemed like you were still pushing against an authority. And that's what I liked about communism and socialism when I was younger, is that it felt like I was fighting an authority. It did feel like I was pushing against some higher up, corrupt power, some institution. I can't truck with that anymore, as you would say. I can't engage with, leftism as it is today now, because it's like, it still pretends that it's fighting against some authority, but it is the authority. It's so clear, whether it's very clear or not. You have corporations are aligned with the rhetoric of leftism now. Like, it's like all the corporations are like, BLM or whatever. It's just like, it seems to me that leftism was so co-opted by the authorities that it made it not only useless at what it should do, which has always been to protect, the underdog, to advocate for the underdog. And that makes me think of like Orwell's initial interest in socialism, right? This idea of, well, this is for the working class, until he did his own, discovery and found, well, these people don't actually even like the working class, the socialists in their cafes talking about what policies they're going to, pass and whatnot. And so it's like, more than ever, leftism is the authority to oppose. It's what's in power now. I mean, you look at Trudeau, you look at all of this, Biden passing out crack pipes and whatever, and it's like, oh, we legalize drugs, I guess. But is that what we really wanted? Was that my childhood leftist dream? Was like legalized drug meant I wanted the guy that's like starting unnecessary wars to pass out crack pipes? I mean, the whole thing has fallen apart. And what is so funny to me is that, like, I think people, particularly in my generation, cling on to the rhetoric. I think there's something still intoxicating about the rhetoric of leftism, because it still espouses this idea of, we're fighting for the working class. Oh, but the truckers are like white supremacists. We're fighting for the poor. Oh, but the poor don't want to get unvaccinated. They're misogynists and racists or whatever. At every turn, when it comes time to stand alongside the actual working class, the actual downtrodden that leftism supposedly fights for, they toss them aside. So
But
it's like,
so I have to defend leftists for a moment and real Marxists and communists who I have some respect for, in the sense that I think that they see through this stuff you're talking about, where you just tweet somebody's a transphobe and then somehow you don't have to have a discussion anymore, which is what Trudeau did. That's for dummies. That's for Tumblr communism. That's so I'm not even interested in them. They're not interesting to anyone besides themselves anymore anyway. So I don't care. I think that the hardcore leftists and the people, and not necessarily even the hardcore socialist or Marxist or whatever, they see through a lot of these things. They see it because at the end of the day, they want to talk about material changes and material economic circumstances. They see that a lot of what's happened over the last couple of years has been a transfer of wealth to huge corporations.
Yeah, which is
under
not a
the
bad
auspices
point.
of protection and some of those things. Again, I'm not like Alex Jones screaming about. I understand early on in the pandemic, being afraid, not knowing what's going on, being concerned, taking precautions. I'm not like an extremist in any way about that. But it's 2022. So I want to actually, like, the people like Alan Moore, I may not agree with him. And if I wasn't clear, Alan Moore is the writer of the comic book, which this movie was based on. And I like him in many different ways. I like him. I think this is where I'm supposed to talk about Alan Moore, not in the second episode. If you want me to talk about him in the second episode, I will. Do you want me to speak to him now?
I think you're supposed to talk about him in the second episode.
Then I will.
I don't know.
No problem.
Do whatever you want.
No, it's fine. So actually, I think we should just conclude here and move on to the next.
No, you have a last point. Oh my God, why do you do this? You just like dumped your points. You were talking about.
I can't. I'm anarchy. I don't deal with outlines.
Yeah, but what's your point? You're saying like the Marxists have a point or whatever, and they're not tweeting.
No, I'm saying that this.
It's not even real leftism.
It is culturally and more of this kind of new. It's a big topic, man, but it's like basically after the failure of real Marxism, which happened with the collapse of the Soviet Union, and even more importantly, which happened with the transition from the Chinese Communist Party to doing Marxist things to becoming really a state-run capitalist enterprise. So once Marxism was basically wiped out, leftism needed a place to go. And, or see, this is complicated. I don't really think we should.
Don't do that. Stop it.
That much.
You have to finish your sentence. You cannot do this to people.
There was a necessity to find a way to use, let's say, broadly speaking, Marxist ideas outside of the purely economic ideas that it had. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I would call Tumblr communism.
Like it's social Marxism. It's like more concerned with social ideas, no?
Well, cultural? you needed in traditional Marxism, you needed to divide people up into classes. So you had the proletariat, right, versus the bourgeoisie and the other classes. Well, once all of that doesn't make sense anymore, and this was understood in the 1960s when these ideas started to metastasize into something different. Metastasize, granted, a little harsh word, but so I think it was Herbert Marcuse was saying, look, the problem is that capitalism kind of works to make the proletariat vaguely happy enough with their life.
And that's a problem.
And that's a problem because now what do we do? And basically the solution was, well, we need to use identity. And again, I am encapsulating a lot of different stuff into one thing. We need to use different identities to create other types of classes which can then war against one another.
Yeah.
And so there are interesting and legitimate and things I don't agree with, but there's actually a philosophy behind a lot of this stuff that then just gets trickled down to dummies that wanted to post left-wing memes on Tumblr in the early 2000s So to me, they're just mannequins. I'm not even like they're just mannequin. Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but you don't understand though, because the mannequins are what is another phrase for mannequin? Like the useful idiot. That's how you get a cultural change. Is the useful idiots.
You're right. You're right. And that's where I don't want to, and I had to do this a lot to you. I always say, oh, don't worry about Twitter. Don't worry about this. I understand. It actually is a legitimate arena of information warfare, I guess, to some degree you would say. But I also, well, it remains to be seen what happens.
Yeah. All right. All of that is true and important and scary. You had a quick point here that might be interesting to finish up with. Projection.
Well, so I'll just quote from Carl Jung briefly. The effect of projection is to isolate the subject from his environment, since instead of a real relation to it, there is now only an illusory one. Projections change the world into the replica of one's own unknown face. And so when you talk about the idea of how could the left, and again, I hate, we always speak in these generalities, but how could the left want to say, become authoritarians while simultaneously seeing authoritarianism in other things? Like they see it in the truckers, right? Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, they're like, yeah, I totally agree. You have to get a vaccine or you can't leave the country. Well, whether or not that's right or wrong, I don't care. It's authoritarian.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, it's fucking nonsensical on so many different, it just is completely doesn't make sense to me, but it does to some people. It's still an authoritarian thing. So I think what happens with, I'm just going to keep using the word Tumblr communism because it's funny. The Tumblr commies, what they do is I think that they do project. So they're the ones that are like, acting like fucking fascists.
Yeah, dude.
Sometimes they're just straight up acting that way.
I mean, there was a lot of
prefer
talk
totalitarianism.
About,
I prefer totalitarianism.
Putting the unvaccinated in camps, and you shouldn't. I mean, you had the fucking, what was this lady that she's like Leah, whatever. I don't remember any of these people's names. She was the one that was like president of Planned Parenthood and then became some like public health figure or something like in the pandemic. She literally said that unvaccinated people shouldn't be able to leave their houses. Like that you should be put under house arrest, essentially, if you're unvaccinated. And it's just like, that's fascist rhetoric, authoritarian rhetoric, whatever you want to call it. That is a vast overreach of government power. So, but it's this thing, right? It's the thing that gets me, that so like warps my mind, is how if you couch that blatant authoritarianism in the language of safety and compassion and goodness and whatever moral issues du jour that, Democrats, leftists, whatever it is, are interested in, let it go, lock them up. Like, that's it. There's no, that's that inability to analyze situations independently of your ideology. It's this shorthand cheat code for assessing the world. So it's like, did it come from the right place? Then it's okay. That's flawed reasoning. It's not about whether it came from this institution or this figure of whatever agency that they're in. Every person, every institution is capable of corruption and failure at best. So this willingness to take these shortcuts and just kind of judge whether something is ethical or moral based on who it comes from. Is it from my side? Is it from the good guys? Does it look like what I hold in my mind based on my ideology as right? The truckers thing is the best example of this. You have the working class. All those people care about, they just want to be left alone. They're not even demanding like, oh, we demand, increase the wages, or we want, equity in the hiring process for all of these businesses, or we want healthcare, like the fucking demands that the left constantly makes, which, hey, some of them are great, but they're legitimate demands. You know what's really easy to meet? A demand to return things to the way they are and leave people alone. That's pretty simple. That's literally asking for nothing. It's just asking to stop doing the new things that you have started to do. And yet...
It's not simple. It's not simple. How do you unwind it? That's the question that's been on my mind for half a year. Is how
you
does someone
have to fucking admit it. That's the
but
thing
he
that
can't. So like,
well,
you can't.
that's an
Like,
ego
imagine
issue.
one of the things with Trudeau. They're like, well, why doesn't he just come to speak with us? Why doesn't he just hear our concerns? That's what you hear a lot of times.
Well, that's to legitimize them, of course, right? And if you're going to be a ruler that says these concerns are illegitimate and you want to disparage a group of people with legitimate concerns as not having a claim to being able to make legitimate concerns, what would you not do is go meet with them. I mean, that's a textbook
Right, but you can't
action from also like a despotic kind of ruler that's like, no, you're not worthy of being met with, that type of idea.
But they can't do it also because there's no way to run the optics of that. There's no way to put Justin Trudeau in front of it on a stage in front of these people. And but think about it. On a simple political calculation.
Just think about it,
like
makes
the
me laugh.
calculation. You can't do it. There's
Have
no way
him meet
he
with
can.
a truck. Just one truck.
He should just meet with a truck.
Like one of Elon Musk's like smart trucks, maybe that truck, the smart AI truck, can be the representative for the truckers. And then maybe Trudeau will get it, right? Because it'll be like a sleek, ex machina-esque smart truck, and he'll be like, this seems, liberal. After all, I'll talk to it. God forbid it be a man in a trucker hat.
It's unwinding, and it's I'm not using the word unwinding in a bad way. I'm saying that, look, they're always, to be fair to some, I always like to remind people that, and again, I'm not an expert in Canadian politics, but many of these things, these policies, were implemented by quote unquote conservative party governors of these provinces. So this, and many of these things that now we might find egregious or problematic, especially early on in America, were across the board politically implemented to a greater or lesser degree. A lot of it really has more to do with less with the state, I think, than with the population of urban and rural, and some of that is probably based on public healthcare ideas of like, look, if you have a population that's closer together, there's probably needs to be some different rules. I don't even disagree with that necessarily, but we're at a point now where, and then because the other thing that's interesting when we're talking about unwinding all this is like, it starts to now look like, because of political pressure, that people are changing the science to say, yeah, it's okay. And that is almost, in a way, part of me, though I'm relieved, it's almost more detrimental if that's because now you see because then you have to ask, well, why were you doing this? Why were you doing this last week?
Yeah. You see that
now, to be fair,
we should just talk at the same time the whole podcast.
Can I finish my fucking point? So listen, anarchy. So not everyone, a lot of people kind of knew that roughly 2 years is about the length of a pandemic. That in history, a lot of times these things by that time start to become milder and less of a problem. And so to some degree, this was going to probably happen anyway, roughly 2 years into it. And so I don't just blame like the politicians and say, oh, you're just removing this just because of political pressure, because we have this weird situation which now reality is intersecting with political pressure, and it's
I don't
a
know,
little
dude.
complicated.
It's too sudden. You have all these places at the same time, like a lot of like the more blue states and whatever, and liberal leaning cities all at the same time, like, oh, we're dropping the mask mandates, oh, we're dropping the this and that and the other, and oh, we're opening up, and it's just like so much at the same time, it seems like, I swear, within a span of a week, I was like, oh, I guess the pandemic is just over. And that's what's fucking infuriating, right? It's like, oh, so it's over when you decided it was over. Like that. So within the span of a week, half the country, it's like, oh, we're done now. Haha, we're done. It's okay. Like, are you fucking kidding? Because just a month ago, you were saying that people that don't wear a mask should be arrested or whatever, or that people that don't have their vaccine card are, murderers and should be, locked in their houses. And the same people will turn around now and say, we need to find a path forward that isn't as divisive. What the fuck are you talking about? That's
but
the
don't
thing
you
that
want
gets
them to do that?
I
mean,
yes
at the
and
end of the
no.
day, that you kind of need them to do that because, and in some ways you can say, well, good, look, political pressure has come to bear, and now people are to some now not in your county. LA County is still like, no,
LA
we're going to mask
County
everybody.
has lost
So-
its mind.
So that's a problem. But to some
New York
degree,
City
like, hey,
was before LA. I can't believe that. So I can't even make fun of New York City anymore because officially the competition for top levels of neurosis has been won by LA. They were talking about that they're probably going to extend it until April. I'm sorry. It's too much. And you know what it is? It's one person. One person. One person gets to make this decision for millions of people. I've had enough.
But the people
Wear
elected
the mask
them.
if you want. I didn't. I'm
well,
a fugitive
that's
in
just
LA,
how it,
though. I don't have.
that's
I'm not
how
a
it
resident.
is. You elect people, and then they make policies. I mean,
Well, that's what they get. They get what they deserve. Okay,
yes.
They get what they deserve.
And they get
Wear
what they
a mask
want.
forever.
Don't forget that. Don't forget that people get what they want. Don't ever
God, I
forget.
hate
There's a
this
bunch of
place.
people that want and hey, fair enough. There's a bunch of people that want Justin Trudeau to be the prime minister.
Yeah, but this
Okay.
goes back to the problem of this episode, right? Which is like, why don't we see these problems? Like, it's not right. It's not right for one person 2 years later to be able to make, overnight a decision of like, you all need to put a face cloth on every time you go in a building, like for another several months. I'm not comfortable with that level of power in a real emergency. Okay, I get it. Everybody understands that. It's been 2 years. Where is that emergency power coming from? So can this person tomorrow be like, women must wear, face coverings forever? Like, is that, isn't that the kind of the same system of power we're having here where one person can just decide, we think it's healthier. And that's it. There's no democratic process except electing that one person however many years it takes.
So that's a great point, actually, and so we can conclude the episode on, because the emergency powers is what has been the justification and the means of creating a lot of curfews, a lot of rules, and a lot of regulations. And perhaps those have a place in a real emergency. Now, I tend to be a little bit more hardcore, like, never,
Well, that's
but I understand
of what happens. Because
right, but 2 years in, you can't keep
2-year-old
talking emergency powers. Have an election. Do this legislatively. If you want to do mask mandates, do it legislatively. Pass laws. Take a vote. Then you can have a true accounting politically of what the populace wants. It's very easy to do it in this. And I'll tell you what. I'm going to make a prediction, and I'm going to go smoke. What I think is going to happen is that the Liberals in Canada and the government are going to turn on Justin Trudeau and they're going to throw him in the trash can. Mm-hmm. So he's done he's done what he's done. Okay. And they're going to do the political calculation and they're going to realize
let him take
this
the
isn't
fall.
going to work. And so then they're going to throw him away and then use that change to protect themselves going forward. I think that's what's going to happen.
And that's what you see in this movie to a certain degree, right? When at the end they turn in the face of the authoritarian regime, remember? And and that's a really interesting. That was a good part of the movie because it shows it's not just one person. It's never just one person. There can be, the face of the regime, but it's the system that is actually nearly immortal and that does the true damage, because the face can be replaced. And usually, there's that kind of trope, right, that the quiet person in the regime, the one right behind the face of power, is the most sociopathic and dangerous. And so, that's the thing about this movie. It's a good crash course reminder of how these systems of power develop and what it looks like when you see them double down and grow. I just think that things like this remind me how easily we're tricked by fragments of understanding the world, like an ideology or what we think things should look like. Like, oh, this is the compassionate thing, and so you enact measures that are cruel in the name of compassion. And you see that on the vans in the movie, the vans that they like snatch up dissidents in and disappear them, say on top of them, "For your protection." So not good. Anyway, what is good is the Silver Eye Society. So if you enjoyed this episode and digging in to the complexities of authoritarianism and being able to identify it no matter what face it wears, by all means, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join the Silver Eye Society if you'd like to become a part of, I won't say the resistance. I would say the disturbance. If you want to partake in some anarchist tendencies, maybe we can start an anarchist tendency training group. Not anarchism, just cultivating the tendency. I think we're already doing that though with these episodes.
I also would like to say that I think if Justin Trudeau is the face of, what did you say, the face of totalitarian power or something like that?
I didn't say that, but yeah.
Well, you said something about the face of, what was it?
Like of a system, of authoritarian system, but he wasn't. I didn't say he was, but...
If he were. Do you think it might explain his proclivity to, in the past, occasionally change the nature of his face in order to dodge, to weave, to bob, to avoid the idea of being identified as the face of a total... I'm just speculating. Anyway, that is all I have to say. Like and subscribe. And what? Why do you make fun of my way of doing it? I'm just saying like and subscribe, and you're like, what did you say? You're like proclaiming you're the resistance, like Star Wars or some shit? I don't know what the fuck.
I didn't say the resistance.
The buzzing? What is it?
The disturbance. I think disturbance.
You want to be the disturbance?
The civil disturbance.
Let's keep things civil. Because as Axl Rose said, what's so civil about war anyway?
I think Axl Rose has shamed himself on Twitter.
I'm sure he has it multiple times.